Okay, we are recording now. So welcome everybody to the monthly webinar, the National Research Collaborative for Foster Alumni and Higher Education webinar series. We are happy to have with us today Maddy Day and Lori Tiller. Just a couple of housekeeping kinds of things before we get started. Live transcription is on right now, so if you would like to use that service, you can turn that on for yourself. This webinar will be recorded, and you can find the recording of it and the PowerPoint presentation on the NRC FAAN website listed here. Feel free to type questions into the chat box as the presenters are talking, and I can read those out to people at the end. Or if the presenters would like, you can do that in another format as well. Just a quick mention of our webinar that's coming up this December. We will be having Chiquita Brown, doctoral student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign College of Education, and she will be talking about youth transitioning from foster care to college, and looking at campus life representing a fresh start where they can be recognized as normal college student, not only as foster youth, and talk about her qualitative research study that she has been working on as well. So with that, I will hand over the floor to Maddy and Dr. Lori Tiller.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be with you all. Great to see some familiar faces. And I know Lori is getting us set up. Wonderful. Perfect.
All right. Can you see it? Just making sure.
Yep, we can see it. It looks great.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay, well, as you heard, my name is Maddy Day. It's so wonderful to be with you all. Lori and I are co-leads of our co-chairs of the FAAN leadership team, and my affiliation is with Maddy Day LLC Associates. I'm a consultant focused on child welfare and education. I'll just note our two other co-leaders as part of our leadership team, and then Lori will take it away. So we have Dr. Carrie Kearney, who comes to us from Oklahoma State University and is the director of Ours for Thursday. Also, you may know her from the director of the National Hidden Populations Conference, and she serves as our research chair. And then Dr. Rachel Strawn is also with us from Virginia Great Expectations. She leads that work out there, and she participates as our communications chair as well on our leadership team. And as I turn it over to Lori, I would love to just get to know a little bit about all of you. If you want to just drop in chat your affiliation and sort of affiliation to the field. Are you a researcher, a practitioner, do a little bit of both? Are you here just because this is interesting to you? We would love to know a little bit about who's joining us today and where you all are from. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Lori Tiller.
Awesome. Thanks, Maddy. Hey, everyone. Lori Tiller. I'm also, as Maddy said, co-chairing the FAAN leadership team. I come to you from the University of Georgia down in the South, and I co-lead our statewide network called Embark Georgia with my colleague, David Myers. So I am excited to be here with you guys today to kind of share the work that we've been doing with FAAN. And so with that, kind of what is FAAN? And so we stand for Fostering Academic Achievement Nationwide. We'll talk a little bit later about the length of time it took us to get to having that name. But who we are is a collective of backbone organizations. We'll talk about what that means, focused on building capacity in the field of foster care and higher education. One of the large pieces that kind of separates us maybe from the campus support program world is that we are focusing at that state level piece. So you'll notice when Maddy did our introductions, Carrie works at the national and state level in Oklahoma. Rachel works in Virginia. We'll look at a map to kind of share with you where all of the FAAN network states are right now. And then my work is kind of at that state level piece for Georgia. We formed in 2016, kind of filling that void in that foster care and higher education, kind of leveraging experiences as states were kind of building these backbone organizations and these networks to come together to chat and kind of share great things, terrible things, kind of in between things. And so that was kind of how it formed back in the beginning. And then the purpose. And so we worked the first several years just kind of sharing those best practices as we could on some phone calls. But our purpose is bringing together those leaders of statewide networks for foster care and higher education in an effort to kind of create pathways and remove those barriers for students who have experience in foster care. And we do that through a variety of activities we'll talk about. And our vision, kind of that long-term piece, right, of FAAN is really just kind of accelerating that national conversation to increase the equity in those educational attainment for students who have experienced foster care in that post-secondary setting. And so we've done that in a variety of different ways over the past few years, but it's really kind of looking at it from that state to state, sharing best practices in addition to kind of that national conversation on the practitioner end. Membership is a pretty strong name. It's a loose affiliation at this point, and the big piece for membership is kind of having that statewide backbone or large statewide impact work that you're doing, looking at it possibly from a regional effort, depending on where you are in the country and how that works in your state, but working and sharing together that information on how you've come together in your state. So this is kind of our map of where we place our FAAN states across the country. You can see we kind of span the whole country, maybe a little less heavy in the Northeast right now, but we've got California on over to Virginia, Georgia, and Florida. So we kind of cross everything we can, little presence there in the South, Southeast, and then we've got across the Midwest too. So just out of curiosity, Maddy, it looks like we've got some chat things going on. Where did you hear folks were mostly from?
Yeah, I'm seeing a bunch of messages. I think we, as far as number of folks, we have strong representation today from Wisconsin and Florida. So Wisconsin, we're definitely going to want to talk to you about some of the great things that you have going. I'm also seeing that we have quite a number of folks who are affiliated with campus support programs, which is really exciting. And we have several researchers on the line with us, some folks that we know, like Nate and Blaine and Lisa. So great to see you all. And even Chiquita, so great to see you as well. You got a shout out at the beginning. We're so excited for your presentation. So really good representation. We'd love to hear from other folks. Feel free to drop your intros and affiliations in chat if you haven't done yet.
Awesome. Thanks, Maddy. Yes, I agree. Wisconsin. We would be happy to talk to you soon. And so if we're talking about kind of longevity of these networks, when we first formed, there were only about 9 or 10 states that were looking at this from that statewide level. And up until about this past year, we brought Minnesota as our newest state that's come on. So we're at 19 states right now. And I think the longest network that's been a part of FAAN is probably in the California, Washington, Michigan range. But some of the networks have been going on longer than FAAN has named itself. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So thanks for sharing all that, everybody. So what are these goals that we have for FAAN? This is something we started talking about somewhere around 2018 or 19, and we continue to reference back to these as we move the work forward. So we're looking at increasing the financial investment in the field of foster care and education. Maddy's going to present a timeline of FAAN here in a few minutes, and so that's going to really look at how we've increased that over the years. And then really to strengthen and broaden those connections between those campus-based support programs and then other spaces of the network. And so that's kind of what we said at the beginning. We know there are lots of campus-based support programs in every state. And a lot of times the networks are forming from those campus-based support programs coming together to kind of coalesce and share those best practices. Sometimes the network is forming first, and then the campus programs come after that. And it's kind of different for each state. But again, for FAAN, it's that purpose of kind of strengthening those connections at that statewide level. We're hopeful to increase that academic achievement for students with experience in foster care. It's one of the reasons that we have our research coordinator in FAAN, Carrie Kearney, that we talked about from Oklahoma. And so we've done a lot of partnering over the years that she's had the National Conference on Hidden Populations to really look at bringing that research to practice back. And then hopefully to move the data and development, kind of sharing that forward. What are states collecting? What are they looking at? How are they noticing progress and change? And then kind of on that advocacy piece a little bit, how are they sharing that information? How are they sharing that among themselves within their state? But how are they sharing that kind of more broadly on the national level? And so our activities really look like kind of bringing those statewide leaders together in an effort to share those best practices. And that looks twofold most of the time. That either looks like we have monthly convenings that we do over Zoom now. We'll talk about what it used to be. But it's really looking at that state to state best practice sharing, and then really looking at how we can take all of that information from those 19 states right now and how we can share that more broadly in a national conversation. At its core, it really is practitioner based, coming together to share what we've learned and how you work through those different systems, because I'm looking at the names on here and I'm definitely preaching to the choir. But the higher education systems in states and the child welfare systems in states are different state to state. They're different within their state. And there's a lot of different pieces that, as you're working at that level, that you're able to share across those lines to be able to support kind of moving forward in that work. So Maddy's going to talk a little bit now about kind of our timeline and where we've been.
Great. Thanks so much, Lori. So as Lori alluded to earlier, FAAN is really comprised of a group of folks that we sort of loosely use the term backbone organizations. Now, you may be familiar with the framework of collective impact, and that's really where that term backbone organization came from as far as our application of it. And, you know, what we want to make clear is no backbone organization looks the same. Every organization looks a little bit different. They serve, you know, a similar but maybe slightly different population, or they serve them in slightly different ways, in the sense that everybody's there to support students with experience in foster care in their higher education journey. Some also support those who are supporting students with experience in homelessness and other hidden populations. Some are also doing, you know, work in high school and college access and into college success and beyond. But our sort of core tie that binds, you could say, is that we are all here to support students with experience in foster care to really advance into their higher education goals. So to bring us all the way back to 2016, which to me, quite honestly, feels like yesterday. And then I think about it and I'm like, oh, 6 years ago. Wow. Okay. It's been some time. FAAN really began as a group of folks, myself included, when I was leading Fostering Success Michigan, who, you know, really were the folks doing this work in their states, in their jurisdictions, that were really leading and innovating around this thing called foster care and higher education. That was, you know, and you could say probably still is a little bit of an emerging field, though I think we've gained in some maturity over the last few years. And so, you know, it really began, I always kind of say, I started FAAN completely out of like self-preservation, self-need, basically. I was having conversations with my close colleagues, asking them, you know, what are you doing to advance your state work? And I was getting really good information, and then I was sharing it back with other people. And I realized this game of telephone that I was playing could be so much more efficient if we just got on a call. And so I just threw it out there and I said, hey, would you guys like to get on a call once a month? And pretty much since August of 2016, we have been meeting monthly, which is pretty amazing. We are a group of practitioners. Some of us, you know, dip our toe occasionally in other spaces of work, from you know, advocacy to research, but we all really identify as practitioners, and that's really the role that we serve. So we joined in 2016, 2017. As Lori said, we weren't always via Zoom, At the very beginning, we were using freeconferencecall.com, and we were joining by phone, which feels kind of wild now to think about, where we are. And, we were having these really, in-depth discussions by phone. And then we evolved to, WebEx, I think was our next evolution. And then we eventually evolved into Zoom. But, it took us a while. For a long time, this work was actually not even happening Zoombox to Zoombox. We were really just voice to voice, but we were really building just such a strong, cohesive relationship as colleagues. And so in 2018, that sort of forming really moved into, what are we going to do with ourselves kind of as a collective? When we really started to think about what's the criteria of the group, who are we, who are we not, what are we not going to do? And we also started to think about our own work and how we wanted that work to show up. One of the biggest pieces was, how do we bring youth into our organizations, into the work that we're doing authentically and as, really part of the conversation and the work. And so that, really was, 2018 was really a phase of sort of formalizing and development. That's when we really formalized a lot of our mission and our vision, and kind of became, I think that was actually when we became FAAN officially. And then in 2019, we met at the Blueprint, the California Blueprint Conference. Hopefully all of you are familiar with that. If not, highly encourage you to attend that conference in the future. They happen every other year. And in 2019, we met and we really started to put our vision for this group together on paper. And we had this sort of charge coming out of that time of being bold and really clarifying like our vision and our voice. And we really wanted to move past kind of just the conversation about, what are we doing, what is working, but how can we influence, others? How can we influence the field? What does it look like to use our collective voice to advocate in different ways? And really to speak to the gaps that we're seeing in practice, and then partner with our research partners. And that led unknowingly to a myriad of opportunities in 2020. So we're all very familiar with what happened in 2020, COVID-19. And for us, it was the opportunity to actually come together and put into practice in a moment that was needed all of those things that we have been doing all along. So coming together, sharing our ideas, sharing what's working, being, a support network for each other, because often the leaders of these backbone organizations are the only person doing this type of work in their state. And, that can make a situation where you feel very lonely. And so we really created a space where, or I would say even sort of affirmed, because I think it was already created, but a space where our FAAN members, could come and know that they were supported, and they could be authentic in the challenges and also the successes, and celebrate the big wins, but also in the moments of, 2020 and COVID-19, there was a lot of hard parts, right? And so we really were able to come together and just share, what was working as organizations and what was working for our students. And so we can go to 2021.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in on the 2020 piece and say
Yeah.
that was really, we probably had more meetings in 2020 than we have had in the past. It really was a great way to have that safe space with each other, but also really get those best practices that were happening at the campus support level through the state level action in a way that we hadn't been able to before in real time. It was, it was one of the first times that we were kind of solving those real time advocacy issues as they were happening. So I think that was really key in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for lifting that. The other piece just to note that really starts to bear fruit in 2021 is the conversation that we've started to have around equity, and moving beyond just a conversation of equity for students with experience in foster care, which is a conversation that by virtue of what we do and where we've been involved in, we've always been involved in that conversation, but really deepening into what does it look like to think about racial equity for our students, and of the students that we're serving, who's missing on graduation day and who are we not seeing that is making it, past these points that we know are so critical toward academic achievement. And so we sort of started those conversations, really recognizing that, the COVID 2019 pandemic helped us see, and, I think helped put a very clear point on the fact that there are students who are just more vulnerable than others, even within our vulnerable population, right? And so what does it look like to actually create resources to support those students beyond what we were already supporting our campuses to create? So 2021 really was a year where we were able to leverage outside resources. And this was really the first time that we had a co-investment from outside funders. We had the Annie E. Casey Foundation, Walter S. Johnson and Stewart Foundation, who partnered with FAAN and John Burton Advocates for Youth to really invest in making learning visible. And so, as you can imagine, a bunch of practitioners sitting around talking about things, we have big ideas. We talk about all these things that we've seen, these success factors, not always great at writing them down. That's maybe one of the hallmarks of why we're different than researchers, is we do a lot of talking and sharing, but we don't always write things down. And so we really kind of said, let's actually write some of these things down. Let's talk about what we've learned over the last few years, and let's share our collective expertise. And, so we were able to end up publishing 3 documents focused on ETV, a document focused on tuition waivers, and then a document focused on successful state level policies. And it was really exciting to see those documents and then the subsequent webinars come to fruition, and really see so many of our FAAN members represented in those documents and just doing exactly what we wanted to do, which is sort of draw out the learning and share with other people, so that, as folks in our colleagues in Mississippi were developing their tuition waiver in real time, they were able to reference our tuition waiver report, which was really exciting to see. We also developed the FAAN website. And again, by virtue of me having been affiliated with FSM, there was some FAAN presence on the FSM website, but throughout 2021, we were able to develop our FAAN website and make that a standalone piece. Lori, I don't know if you want to, go ahead and share that with folks. So here you can see, there we go. You can see our FAAN website. And just for you all to know, it is faannetwork.com. And so you can see that up there. It's FAAN and then network, all one word. So yes, thank you for dropping that in there into chat. So we have some information about who we are, and then we have under evidence, is actually where the documents that we have created live, and then under resources, so you can see these here. I know we have the documents and we have our webinars, so that's all available right there. And then under resources, we have what we, as FAAN members really identify as some of the key resources that we find helpful in the development of our work. Not surprising, a lot of this comes from California because they've been such a leader in developing resources. Indiana also has some really helpful resources as well. And then we have our national map. This is our newest piece that we have added. Many of you may be familiar with the national map that also exists on the Fostering Success Michigan website. And so we worked with them to bring over this information. We are currently still populating this. So if you don't see your campus on here, that does not mean that you won't be included. It just means we haven't gotten to you yet. And for some places, we know that you're going to have to zoom in because there's a lot of bubbles in certain areas. And so you won't necessarily see all of them right on there. But just know that we are still building this out. And we're really excited about the growth that this represents, and having another tool for folks to be able to see all of the amazing campus support programs that are out there, and that FAAN is, working to lift their voices and elevate their work. So moving forward back into 2022, FAAN had this really amazing opportunity for co-investment in 2021. And then in 2022, we had another opportunity for co-investment that really led to some support around innovation. So at this point, as Lori has said, FAAN is now composed of 19 states. We have 22 member organizations, 5 affiliate member organizations, and you can see the list of our reports that we have been able to publish. We've also had continued investment in FAAN through a partnership with the Annie E. Casey Foundation and Walter S. Johnson through Educate Tomorrow to support some specific capacity building. And this was the first time that we had work groups, and they were specifically focused on developing a data agenda and a key advocacy messages agenda. And so the results of that we hope to have on our FAAN website by the end of the year. There's still some work in progress. We actually just had presentations from our colleagues at Educate Tomorrow at the California Blueprint Conference, which is really exciting. But, it's been a great way to actually have deeper conversations about some of the areas that we as FAAN members talk about often. How do we collect data that actually represents our student experience? What kind of data is out there? Where are the holes in the data? Specifically, as we think about from both the campus level and the state level, what do we want to be able to say about our students and how they're moving through their academic journey? And then on the advocacy side, it's really thinking about what's the opportunity for shifting a narrative. And, one of the things that we have talked about, has really been that for a long time, the narrative that, we rely on is this narrative around 3% of students with experience in foster care achieving a college degree, which, when you really look at the data, is not totally an accurate story. And when we look at some of our FAAN sites, we see that it's really not the truth. And one of the things that we have learned through just being able to share data and have conversations is that, the difference that we see so strongly is where there is strong support, having backbone organizations, having campus support programs, right, that really help shift the outcomes for students. And, we believe that that's part of the systems change that we're all really trying to work toward. So that advocacy project has really been an opportunity to help our sites really shift the narrative in their states.
And Maddy, I'm going to jump in on that one for the different work this year, doing those different work groups. The other thing to keep in mind, as we're talking about this with the 19 states and our members, only about half of those states leaders are paid to do this work full time. So that's been one of the challenges as we continue to grow and bring states in and ask folks to work in addition to monthly meetings, is to support, how to support their time in giving to those work groups and looking at that advocacy and data piece. Was the first time we've really been able to do that. And folks really stepped up. And that was very new for us. And it was great to see how that work had progressed. And we try to always keep in mind, though, that quite a few of our state leaders, this is not their full-time job, is to run their statewide network. And so that's one of the things that we consistently kind of have to keep coming back to as we consider that capacity growth.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for lifting that. So, as we think about the future of FAAN, there's more to come. We continue to do our monthly Zoom meetings, and we will continue to work on advocacy and data, messaging, capacity building, development. We, have talked with our FAAN members over the last few months and really asked, what are some of the next pieces that we need to start building out? One of them is an onboarding process for new states. And, sometimes we forget that we've, for those of us that have been doing this a while, I always joke, I'm a social worker that sort of fell sideways into education, fully not intending to, but, sometimes those things happen, and found my way because I had an amazing group of people who helped me find my way. And there are easier ways to do that. We don't have to just wait for people to find their way. We can actually create, I think a more straightforward onboarding process that will really help new states that are developing their backbone organizations and developing that capacity, figure out kind of what are the pieces to put into place that are going to be really supportive to the efforts that they're developing. And then finally, one of the pieces that we're really excited about, and this actually builds off of the amazing work that Lori has done as part of her dissertation, is helping to develop a framework for formation and sustainability of backbone organizations. So Lori was gracious enough, or maybe audacious enough, we're not sure, to use her doctoral work to really dig into how these backbone organizations form, and what do they look like, and what are some of the key elements of these backbone organizations, and what should folks consider as they're developing them. And so based on Lori's work, we're really excited about being able to package that in a practitioner form so that, again, we can provide a little bit of a blueprint for future folks, because we would like to see more than 19 states, having less than half of our states. It's more than the 9 that we started with, but it's not nearly enough. And we really, when we think about equity, we really want to be able to be part of creating equity within opportunity for our students. And we really see that as, equity comes from the system as well. And so we really need to be able to do our part to create equity in who has these resources available in their state.
Yeah, and I
So
would
with
add
that,
on
yeah.
that, kind of that transition from 2019 to 2020, as we were looking at that, we had quite a few states add on during that specific kind of transition year. We had 5 or 6 states that jumped in with us, which was great. And we had not thought about the onboarding piece. So that was another exciting thing to kind of have that space and time in 2021 with that influx of funding that we talked about, to host those focus groups to really talk with our FAAN membership about what would be helpful. And that's where the data and advocacy projects came out, but also in that was when it came out about the onboarding piece. And exactly as Maddy said, some of our states have been on these phone calls since 2016, and what's been talked about and how things have been tried. And then we have folks that have only been on 2 or 3 years with us. And so they all kind of say, it's great information, but what are those kind of essential kind of building block pieces that we need to know? And so that's one of the things that we're hopeful in the next year or so, is to really look at what's that onboarding process when a state decides that they're interested in joining, or hears about us, or reaches out to us on the website. And then what are those pieces that we can provide that give them a value add in their state, while still kind of maintaining the value add of the FAAN network. So that's when we're talking about how new this work is. It's even newer than maybe we've alluded to, because kind of the longest network of state is just shy of 15 years, which we all know in this work is not that long of a time. So this is all still very new, and some of our states have really only been at this a couple of years. So we know that while this is less than half, I'm sure that there are more states working at this level. So we're hopeful that by sharing what FAAN is and how it's done, that we can get some of those added states. Just had to jump in, Maddy.
No, I love it. And I will just shamelessly say, Wisconsin, we're looking at you. We've been hearing great things, and now seeing several of your folks show up sort of confirms that we think that you're a state that we should be talking to. So we'd love to connect. So with that, we want to open it up for questions. We'd love to hear, what questions folks have for us, or about, the work or anything.
I just wanted to say hello. This is Gail from Wisconsin.
Hi, Gail.
Hi, Gail.
I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I already wrote your name down and was like, okay, we need to connect with Gail after this call. So
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Thank you.
yeah, wonderful.
And y'all feel free to drop some questions in the chat. And
Yeah,
if there's a slide
absolutely.
you want more information on or something additional that we can share, we're happy to talk about that.
So I have one question in the chat here. How can we bring states into the fold who are not currently part of FAAN?
That is an
Yeah,
excellent
Lori,
question.
do you want to take it away?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to bump back a little bit to, I'm going to make everybody sick for just a second, but to our map. So we've got that kind of what we're talking about. Yeah, so there are, a couple of ways. Is Maddy and I'll share information and the FAAN email at the end, and you can reach out to us that way. There's a contact us button on the website that we do monitor. We promise we send responses. That's how we got Minnesota. And then if there's any, you can reach out to the NRC folks and they could put you in touch with us as well. And oftentimes what it starts with is a Zoom call with either me or Maddy or me and Maddy to kind of see where you are and see what kind of work has been happening. And that's where we kind of have that conversation of campus-based support work versus maybe larger regional work in your state versus statewide work. So it's generally never a no. It's generally let's make sure we find the right space that you will grow in. Is that fair, Maddy?
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect way to say it. And I
All right.
see Lisa. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, I wanted to pop on and say hi, but actually I also do have a real question.
That's
So the network is for practitioners, and I'm a huge fan of the work that you're doing. I also am seeing familiar faces and names here that are researchers. So can you give us a direct ask of what you want from us as researchers and how we can support FAAN and just what you want, how we can help?
Yeah, I mean, I always say like the FAAN members probably often have like more questions. Well, let me just say this definitively. The FAAN members do have more questions than we have capacity to answer. I think that there's, a whole opportunity, particularly as we've done some foundational work around like the data agenda to really think about like, okay, so what's possible? Because what we've identified is really what we're able to gather as practitioners. And we have, meaning that makes to us, but I think there's an opportunity for us to probably pair with a researcher or some researchers to really think about like, what should we be collecting and where could we find data from places that we may not necessarily think about because we're coming at it from practitioner sort of space. There might be other places that researchers are more aware of. I think, that's always a piece that we're kind of considering. And then, I think, I don't know, there's probably a myriad of topics that we have intersectional interest around that, from the practitioner side of FAAN, we could probably provide some like practitioner perspective to some of the research that you all are also doing. And so, I think the mechanism that we've sort of had at this point is like flowing through Carrie Kearney, which has been helpful, and FAAN members that have been able to be part of the Hidden Populations Conference. And I think that we could probably talk about, what other opportunities are there to make sure that there's like, clearer communication pathways between researchers and FAAN members so that we, can be better participants. I think probably every person in FAAN that represents a state or jurisdiction would be like, I would love to have a researcher come and help me, with my state. And, the part of it is most folks in FAAN don't have like a pot of money that they're able to offer folks, but they, maybe have other things that can be leveraged. So, Texas is maybe the only outlier in that they have like embedded researchers within their FAAN membership, and so that's often a great place that we get to tap into with that regard. But Lori, I'm curious what other thoughts you have.
Yeah, I was going to give kind of a couple of examples, Lisa, of when, like, how that's kind of worked for us. Texas is actually one of the examples. We had quite a few conversations over the years on, does that designated point of contact, foster care liaison, human on a campus, not necessarily a campus support program, but human on a campus, how does that, is that effective? What are the outcomes? What does that look like? We know, like, anecdotally, that's a great thing to have, but we kept talking about it for so many years that I was super appreciative when the Texas folks put together for the national conference, they actually looked into that, right? And so now there's some research on that for us to kind of have as a jumping off point. So that was kind of huge for us. And then, a tiny little piece is when you as the researcher decide you're interested in looking at X, Y, and Z state, the FAAN folks are great people to reach out to get you connected to some of those campus support programs or whatever the unit of analysis is that you're interested in using. I've helped a couple people out with that before in our area. So some of it's kind of very practical help out, and some of it is, if you guys have questions, that's something that we could throw out to the group to see if anybody has ways of helping to answer that for you from that practitioner lens. But I think conversations like this are really helpful. And then I would say at least once a year, we really do have a meeting that's kind of centered on what are we missing. And so we kind of ask folks if there's something that they're interested in, and we kind of keep that running list. So that's probably another piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just sort of reflecting, like, it has been a long time, even though, again, time is weird, since 2009, but it's been a long time since I was running campus support programs. And at the time, there was a canon of research that I know I was referencing when I was developing the Champions program at UW. And I think we just can't underestimate how important it is to practitioners that they be that they be abreast of research, right? And so I would also say, like, as there are findings, as you all are publishing articles, please know that, like, send them to myself, Lori, our FAAN, email, because we circulate those things out to our network. And as practitioners, we're constantly looking at the research to kind of, answer questions or provide more information. But we also, sometimes we're just limited in the research that we're able to have access to by virtue of being practitioners. Not all of us are based at, universities or places where they have access to those things. And so just thinking about FAAN as a place where people are really going to be interested in the emergent findings of research, but may not always know that, like, these are the latest things coming up, or not every FAAN member is, like, subscribing to, child welfare alerts, and getting all of the latest research that, is coming out. So definitely don't be a stranger. Reach out to us. We will, I think, talk about finding ways to reach out more to the research community as well. I will personally say, I think that there's just a whole big opportunity to, think about what it looks like to research these statewide organizations, these backbone organizations. Lori's research for her dissertation was really kind of a first look at what do these statewide backbone organizations look like? What do they encompass? And some of us have things that are written down about them, some of them don't. I think that there's a lot to mine there. So if anybody, sort of interested in just understanding statewide backbones, I think that there's lots of questions that people would be happy to answer.
Yeah, that not writing it down is definitely a theme from all networks. And there's sometimes just not time to write it down. And I think to tag on to, and thank you, Angelique, for putting that in the chat. We reference y'all's website as often as we can. Remembering that these folks, a lot of them, again, it's not their full-time job. And so with that also means they don't always have access or time to even, like, try to search out the emergent learnings that are happening. And so as much as we can expose them to that through you guys, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Lisa. Lots of like generative ideas. What other questions do folks have for us?
I think one other thing is you can see by the folks who attended today that there are lots of folks in this group who have an interest in doing research and supporting community members to participate in research. So please know if you have someone that's like, man, we have no capacity to do evaluation of our program, but we want to know what's working, what isn't working, that we are happy here to, match you. If you have somebody in a specific state and they want to work with a local evaluator, we're in enough states, we can at least try to do that local matching. So know that's a resource and partnership here for you.
Awesome. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Nate, I see your hand.
Right. Thanks, Maddy. Thanks, Lori. Good to see you too, and some other folks on the call. So it was really cool to hear about FAAN's history and just how it came from let's meet and see what happens to where you are now. So this is kind of like a big picture goal. So thinking to like 2030, do you have like a vision of what FAAN might be, could be, hope to be?
That's a juicy question. I can start off a little bit of sharing some reflections from the Blueprint conference, because we were just last month we were able to get together. I guess it's still actually October. I don't know what month I'm in.
Yeah,
it felt like
that's
a month ago. But we were able to have a gathering, a FAAN gathering, and we had, I think, over 30 folks at that in that space, and we really talked about this, like what's future for FAAN, and there is some interest and some thought around what does it look like to have a technical assistance center that is supportive of the field in general, but particularly like the practitioner side of the field, both at the campus support program level and at the statewide program level. And I think maybe by being virtue of practitioners, we're all a little bit maybe overly pragmatic is maybe the polite way to say it, in that we just don't know that something like a technical assistance center, something that we really think is on the horizon in a federal legislative sense, right? And so, we really understand that until we get to a place where the conditions are such that something like that might be able to happen, for the practitioner side of things, it's us, right? It's the FAAN members. And so I would say, by 2030, I would like to have very solid documentation of how to run, how to start, how to lead a backbone effort. I would hope that maybe would have even been updated, once within the next 8 years of that time horizon, just thinking that like, we know what we know now, but honestly, every state that joins FAAN brings something new for us to consider. And so I think that there's a lot for us to constantly learn from and iterate from and add to. So I would like us to have more documented about how to do this work. I would love for there to be a FAAN sort of data dashboard for us to have, even if it was a handful of indicators, maybe even less, I'm willing to compromise, but, some common indicators that every state is collecting that really represent, on a high level, the education trajectory of our students with experience in foster care. Nate knows this well. I would love for that data to be disaggregated. I think I will push for that until, that dream becomes a reality. And I would also really love to hear a narrative that not just FAAN, but I think the field is carrying, that is much more of a strengths-based narrative about our students, and that the challenges that are being identified are really identified as challenges that the system needs to rise to meet, not that students need to rise to meet, and that we move away from an exceptionalism narrative and move away from a 3% narrative that makes it seem as though it's nearly impossible for students to achieve academic goals, and really that we move and have moved to a narrative that says, no, the system is responsible for meeting you where you're at, and the system has all the tools at its disposal to be able to do that, right? And so, you know, that's really lofty for 8 years. So I don't know if we're going to get there, but I do think that there's seeds of that we're starting to sow now, and I think that our partners within FAAN, you know, they build really powerful partnerships within their states. And I think that the way that we change the system is one state at a time. And I think that, you know, over time will continue to improve outcomes overall, ultimately for our students, which is, you know, what we ultimately want to see is more students succeeding in college, achieving their goals. So until we get, you know, amazing federal legislation, it's going to be us, and we're going to keep fighting. So I don't know, Lori, what else do you want to add?
I think my only add is probably on the pragmatic side is that I'd love to increase the capacity of these network leaders to be able to do this work in a way that they can do it full-time kind of thing. I think from what I found, the data shows if the state is able to support this work and this person, more gets done, which makes sense. And I think if by 2030, even just the 19 states that we have currently are being led by folks that get to do this for the majority of their job, that would be an amazing thing to have happen. And I think, piggybacking on Maddy's point, that's going to take writing it down and making sure we've really got that foundational piece about what works and how to do it, and that we're able to share kind of how to talk at that statewide level to inform those outcomes. I think it's about the data. I think it's about all of those pieces, but allowing these leaders the capacity to do this work in a way that is supporting them, I think is the other way we're going to be able to increase the capacity of the network.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Nate. I appreciate it. I always appreciate the opportunity to dream big.
Oh, that's awesome, Gail. I just saw that. That's very cool.
Yeah, very, very cool.
So I also just want to say, and I am like a champion for moving legislation in Congress, and I spent a lot of time on that and love that vision. But I also want to say is we also don't have to wait. There are good conversations that can happen at the administrative level. There have been conversations with the U.S. Department of Education and with the Children's Bureau on talking about developing a cross-disciplinary team to really explore. Obviously, they don't want it to be only higher ed focused. They want a K-12 lens on this. But the fact of the matter is, we can also be doing some concurrent planning through communication through the administrative policy level. The new Biden appointee is a big fan of interdepartmental collaboration. She comes from that. So I think we have some really cool potential to have this conversation in multiple ways.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Absolutely. I know we have just about 5 minutes left. Are there any last burning questions or anything that we can clarify for folks? All right.
So Maddy and Lori, thank you so
Yeah.
much for taking the time to share your story and help educate our NRC members in the good stuff that's happening at the practitioner level and opportunities to collaborate across researchers and practitioners. That's how we move the needle. That's how we tell the great stories. So we just want to say thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Great.
This was great.
Yeah, thank you to you both, Lori and Maddy. And just a reminder that this recording will be on the website, and to be sure to join us for the December webinar on Tuesday, December 6th. So thank you all for being here today.
Perfect. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. All right,
Thank you
Gail,
so
I have
much.
your email, so we're gonna send you an email soon.